Welcome, everyone, to Flow at Work. My name is Emma Thomas, and today I have joining me in the studio Mike Simpson. Welcome, Mike. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Having a good day today. Thank you.
So, for those of you who have not had the chance to meet Mike, or even better yet, work with Mike before, Mike is our resident ITSM guru, all things ITIL, service desk, change management. I have learned so much from him, and I'm very excited to welcome him to Flow at Work today. So, Mike, you have a laundry list of certifications and qualifications. Can you maybe just share a little bit of your experience with ServiceNow, maybe what's been your journey with the platform thus far?
I really got into working with ServiceNow about 7 years ago. Came into an organization on the operations side, working to rebuild their change management process. So they were working in another tool and were implementing ServiceNow, and it was kind of a strange one to do. They had CMDB up and running. They had the team using HR, but they wanted to get ITSM going, but they started with change management first, which is kind of unusual. But because they had compliance issues, there was a priority there. So it came in and started working to rebuild their change process for a large global organization on the platform. From our success there led to building out the rest of the ITSM. And I've been working in ServiceNow ever since. So managing development teams on ServiceNow, then switched over to consulting. So I've been doing ITSM, performance analytics, hardware asset management, software asset management, overlapping into CMDB, health and build outs. So a pretty wide background, I would say. Not, there's so much to the ServiceNow platform, but it's kind of starting with that ITSM and starting to build out now into other areas.
Seems like a better question to ask you would have been, what area of the platform haven't you worked with?
There's always something new out there. So I know here at Platformation, WSD, we've got teams for that. I have not dug into WSD. It's an interesting, and I almost wonder if there's going to come a point where ITSM and WSD are going to start overlapping and coordinating on how to get that service to the desk quickly and properly, and resolve issues as quickly as possible. I think there's a growth opportunity there. We'll see more there, I think.
I have to agree with you there. I think I have had the experience of being on several WSD projects myself, so I think it's really only very fitting. I wanted to ask you, I think one area that I'm aware of that you have a lot of expertise is with service desk operations. And as we both know, while ServiceNow has expanded their book of business very much so, robustly, to go beyond just that of something that serves the service desk, it's still its bread and butter, right? It's still the module that everybody knows ServiceNow for, ITSM. So let's talk about the service desk real quick. Maybe not even quick. In your experience, both working on the industry side with service desks and on the consulting side, sort of supporting service desks, what are your service desk red flags that jump out to you and you're like, oh my God, this needs to change?
There's a few things that jump out at you on service desk. One is anything that ends up in a bad user experience. And I think a lot of IT organizations that are struggling in the service management space are focused around what IT needs for IT, and not what, those IT for IT or type of workflows where, how do I resolve a person's issue as quickly as possible? How do I fulfill their request as quickly as possible? Putting the focus on those things rather than, well, I need to have all these reports. I need to document 100 different fields. It adds to the handle time. And it's like going to that ticket counter at the airport and they're sitting there typing War and Peace in there for an hour and a half to assign a seat. It's like, things can go a lot quicker and easier and faster. And in this day and age with so much automation, that is the expectation of our end users, is that things should be easy, things should be quick, and things should be automated. So these manual processes really break down and cause issues. And those are the big red flags, is if there's a lot of handle time and a lot of manual processes on the back end, you're not meeting the needs of your environment.
And are you even seeing organizations that have the metrics and the data to measure the employee experience? Because I feel like that's got to be a gap too, right?
I don't think they do enough in most organizations that I'm seeing, especially with the survey capabilities you have on the platform in ServiceNow. It seems like that's something that's under leverage. I'm still seeing a lot of organizations exporting stuff to Excel and putting things in spreadsheets and or in third-party tools, Tableaus and whatnot to try to track those metrics. And they can create 100 metrics, but they don't really do a good job of understanding what metrics drive their business and what drives their end user experience and learning which levers to pull. You can measure a thousand things, but you really got to find those levers to pull that make a significant difference to your end users. And a lot of organizations, especially the large global ones, aren't getting there. They're not figuring that out easily or quickly.
Mm. In your opinion, and I'm sure that there's no one size fits all approach to this, which is, has to be acknowledged. But in your opinion, what are maybe some of the universal levers that should be pulled? You just talked about pulling the right levers and you can measure 1,000 things, but what is the right things to measure? So if you were to, give your advice, what would those things be?
One of my favorites is a CSAT score, a customer satisfaction score. You should be doing this on a regular basis. If you're not, you can do it as part of your incident management process. That every incident creates a survey to your end user to measure their experience. You could do it weekly, monthly, quarterly, but you should have ongoing satisfaction surveys. 1 to 10 type of score, and you're looking for that 8, 9, 10 type of score. That alone will tell you how you're doing as an IT organization. There's a lot more you can drill into. Things I like to look at. What are my handle times? If there's wait times, how incident resolution. You want to make sure that that end user experience is positive, and the way you're doing that is by making sure you're resolving things with the correct answer quickly. And any metric that can drive that and show that data to you is putting you in the right place.
Mm, yep, that's so important. And I don't see surveys being done enough, right? And also how do you I feel like people probably get survey fatigue a little bit, It seems like every time you're on the phone with a customer service agent or you're sending an email inquiry, you get a survey request. So, I'm sure that there's also a right way to do those surveys as well.
There's a right and a wrong way, and I just had this experience in my personal life where somebody sends me a survey on a service that I was happy to get and got really good service and wanted to give the survey feedback. So I went in and it had that CSAT score, and I gave them the 10. And then that went to another question, which went to another question, which went to, and by the time I'm 10 pages in on answering questions, it's like I'm done. You've lost me. I'm willing to go in and click 1 or 2 times. I'm not willing to go in and answer 10 or 15 questions. And you don't have permission from your end users to ask them that many questions that takes up that much of their time. And you've missed the point. At that point, you're gathering way too much data that nobody's going to act on. And that's not efficient in my mind. So yes, I get opinionated about it. Keep it short, keep it simple. There's strategies you can do. I've seen things like if a person has received a survey or provided feedback in the last 30 days, don't ask them again. So you're only getting a hit once every 30 days. So it's not necessarily if I open 5 incidents in 1 month, I would only get one survey. Things like that can help manage it. I've seen organizations do it 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6, or something like that. So it's not every incident, but or it could just not doesn't have to be incidents. It could be incidents, requests, anything. So you can manage those expectations so that you're not taking up too much of your end users' time. Everybody's busy today. We got real jobs to do. We have to be able to focus on those. But that said, if I had a bad experience or I had a good experience, I want to be able to provide that feedback. And you need to give your staff the ability to provide that feedback.
World, you heard it here first. We are taking the 3-click max approach. Mike and I are trademarking it. 3-click max.
Yep.
That's it. It's funny too
Don't
because
take me down the
I
rabbit
love.
hole. Don't take me down the rabbit hole.
I'm here to take you down the rabbit hole. I'm your rabbit hole tour guide. No, it's funny because I love anytime we can bring in real world examples. And I know this seems so silly, but I remember like being in airports and the first time that, and I'm sure like other industries have adopted this as well, but you're walking out of the airport bathroom and they just have the three smiley faces, smiley face, neutral face, frowny face. And all you have to do is just slap one of those buttons to give your feedback. And that's it. Like that's, I feel like that's the extent of it really. And, obviously you can take it a little deeper than that, but that's it, right? Like that's what we want.
It gives you what you need to take action. And that's one of the big things about surveys is don't ask a question if somebody provides you feedback on that question that you don't do something about, because that's another pet peeve is I've given organizations horrible ratings on something because they dropped the ball completely. Nothing happened. Don't bother surveying me. If I come in and say you should have done X, Y, and Z and you didn't do it, and then it just disappears, you've wasted your time. You need to confirm back to them and make it right, figure out, have some kind of follow-up, something to show that you're taking action to resolve the issues or explain what happened or why it happened, because you can't always fix everything. But if you get any kind of comment or negative feedback, you need to take an action on that. Otherwise, you're sending a wrong message.
This could just be a result of me working in the IT space for perhaps a little too long now. But anytime I see announcements, like when you're opening your phone and you've got the App Store, I have an iPhone, but the equivalent of on like an Android phone, and you see like we're fixing these bugs because users reported feedback, this and that. And I'm always like, wow, companies are actually doing something with user feedback. I'm just so skeptical and jaded.
Yeah. And tying this back to a service desk, I've been in organizations where they've been referred to as a helpless desk, and where you've got cultural issues going on, and this is a strategy you could implement to figure out where you're at today and how I'm going to change that and change the attitudes and enable people to feel like they had a voice in driving that change within the organization to provide better service. But if you are just there to answer the phone and document your tickets without worrying about the user experience, you're never going to make a difference in how your organization's perceived.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that because it kind of made me think of something that I've been talking a lot about recently, and that's the role of the office. And it's sort of an interesting corollary to the role of the service desk, because I feel like so many people just think they know maybe at a surface level like what a service desk is there for, but really a service desk should serve a much more nuanced or not complex, but like a sophisticated role than what people give them credit for. And if they have the right tools and they have the right measures in place to measure the effectiveness of those tools, the service desk can and should be a very important and integral part of an organization.
Agreed. And that's why I think one of the many reasons why ServiceNow has been so successful as a platform is it's been able to grow just beyond a service desk into the rest of the IT business and the organization behind it, and bringing the mentalities of how to run an efficient service desk to other business units, and putting a face on it as, originally with Service Portal, now Employee Center, that this is a place you can go to get those solutions and answers to whatever it may be. From an end user perspective, I don't know if something's a finance issue, an HR issue, an IT issue. I just know I have a problem with my paycheck and I want it fixed. And being able to have these entry points through an employee center or through a service desk that can get the answer to the right place automatically, bringing AI into the equation to route these to the right place to get the solution as quickly as possible to resolve the end user's issue, and not put these arbitrary silos in place, which unfortunately, as organizations corporate organizations, the large global ones in particular, love these silos. And the HR team's not going to work with the IT team, who's not going to work with the finance team because they're all doing different things. And all of that works together to drive a bad user experience. So the more you can integrate those workflows across those organizational units to deliver the experience, you're going to do better. And I think we've learned a lot of those lessons on the IT side, but there's a lot more that we can be doing within an entire enterprise.
I know this sounds like such a sales pitch, but it's so true. The more customers use ServiceNow for, the more powerful it is. But you can't just throw a tool at something and expect that to fix the problem. And I think that's where I wanted to circle back to something you said in your kind of introduction when we were chit-chatting about, your experience and all of that. And you mentioned either a customer or a team that you worked for that started with the change management piece. And I wish that were just the regular way of doing things, but that's not. You specifically called that out as something that was unusual. You're not used to that. So I'm curious, because I think that also ties in very nicely with the narrative that you were just talking about with the people element, right? Like, you can implement a new ServiceNow module, but if you don't have the people in the process to go along and change with that, then the tool's not going to be successful by itself. So can you share with me what that experience was, like a little bit more about, just what that looked like, and maybe how starting with change management helped that be more successful?
Yeah, and it was an interesting situation because I kind of came in after some of it was already in motion, but I, I I think what happened is, again, large global organization. You had different parts within that organization doing their own thing. So they'd done some work already with CMDB. So some of the discovery was running. They had some of that baseline foundational data out there. HR was doing their own thing, but they did it on ServiceNow. So they had the HRSD module going in ServiceNow, but they were doing it completely on their own. So you're approaching it the wrong way in my mind. You've got different teams doing different things, and they just happen to make the same decision to use ServiceNow as their tool. But where I see the opportunity is to bring more governance earlier in the process, setting that vision. Where do you want to go? What are your priorities as an organization? Figuring out the tool and the modules that can drive the most business value, and doing them in the right order, that you can build off of the success of each item as you go forward, that you can then move deeper into the platform. And we always say, don't boil the ocean. You're not going to do everything all at once. You got to do pieces at times, one piece at a time. But if you can come in with some vision early on and governance around the platform, and then set priorities of, okay, let's get CMDB in place because that's the foundational. It will feed into a lot of the other pieces of the organization. We can do ITSM, we can do HR, we can do WSD, and then keep building from that. What I liked about doing change management first was it got you connectivity into all the different IT teams do change. And so it wasn't something that one group over here was doing and everybody else was ignoring. It touched the entire IT organization at once with a single process. And figuring out, in that organization, they had, in the way they were doing change, they had different business units doing change completely separately, all in one tool, but one team would use this part of the change form, another part of the change form for a different team, and another team over here doing it. And it was really, really fragmented. So we got them all to align into a change process that was flexible enough that all the different business units could do what they needed to do and meet their requirements without having to modify or customize a lot. So we built a simple flow for the change process that was flexible, that could accommodate all those use cases. But that brought in all these teams into the tool, and then got their brain spinning. Could we do this? What about this? What about this? And it just started taking off from there, because they all saw what was possible, and then they were all ready to start taking that next step and eager to take that next step. So change really worked well in that sense, because we got everybody on board and got everybody moving in one direction.
Wow. What a story. I mean, you are just being such a great champion for change management. Thank you. I feel like we are at the precipice of being pioneers for this shift, right? I mean, if you kind of it makes me think about some of the history that I've learned over the last few years just around information technology as an industry and where it got its start, almost like 80 years ago ish, maybe not quite that long, but I feel like with the way the IT industry has evolved, where, you went tool heavy and it was like, oh, we can customize the heck out of it because, the tools are so basic that you need to customize, to then it was like, oh, wait, now the tools are smart enough that you don't need to customize them. So just use them out of the box, which means we don't care about the people or about the process because you should just follow the tool. And that makes sense to some extent. But when you start treating people like you treat systems, that's a problem. Because as far as I know, haven't heard of this yet. ServiceNow doesn't have emotions. The service portal isn't. They can be cranky and not want to work, but the service portal doesn't feel dejected when you leave it off an email, And so to me, we've treated people the same way that we've treated the system for too long. And so that's something that I've been trying to do more with my customers, especially the more I get immersed in change management and communications and things like that, is treating people like people. It seems like such a stupid thing when I say it, like a duh. But how often does that not happen,
It's the biggest risk right now, I think, within IT organizations is putting the tools in the system first. You get people implementing tools because it's the latest and greatest, or because it's what they've worked for, because it's what they're familiar with. And they really need to flip it all around and always put the end user experience first, that you're there to drive business value through your end user experiences. How can you use the tools to improve those end user experiences? I do believe standardization on tools like ServiceNow, using as much out of the box workflow, helps drive that user experience. Usually what I see with organizations is that they start customizing things. They're doing it for their internal IT purposes. Oh, well, I have to have this report, or I need this piece of data for some reason. It's not driven. It has nothing to do with the end user experience. And that customization leads you to a lot of tech debt and added costs. But I think from a user experience, we're all used to doing things on our mobile devices. We're all used to doing things on web portals, that Amazon cart experience and whatnot. Those are very familiar interfaces to end users. So the more we can bring our IT processes, not even just IT, our business processes, to our end users in very familiar, comfortable ways, they're going to adopt it and be happy with it and be satisfied with it. That, hey, I was able to onboard and submit all my compliance documents and everything else in a really quickly, easy fashion, and then that resulted in a laptop showing up at my house. It's like it should all just happen, and it should be easy and intuitive, where you don't have to spend hours and hours training people to do it. Right now, a lot of organizations aren't doing this well, but I think that's where we need to be going and driving towards in the future. I know my son just graduated college, and his first job, he's working in a ServiceNow portal, not on the IT side of it as a user of it, when you're getting onboarded. And his response was, "Oh, I hate that." It's like, well, I know we all love ServiceNow, but if the end user is hating it, you've driven a bad experience and you've done something. You've probably over customized things or manipulated things in ways you shouldn't have done, and it's not working for your end user. And that's the exact kind of experience you don't want to be creating right now, is that negative takeaway from it. So the out of the box, it's one of my sayings is, out of the box ServiceNow is probably a better process than anything you're doing today in your business. It's industry vetted. It's kind of generic and vanilla. It's kind of the best practice from a lot of different sources, kind of crowdsourced, if you would. But at the end of the day, most organizations have so over complicated everything that the out of the box experience is way better from a user perspective.
That reminds me of, so I, from time to time, I'll browse Reddit. I don't know if you go on Reddit ever. And there's a bunch of different subreddits, and one of the subreddits is Ask Reddit, and people will post, all kinds of different questions on Ask Reddit. And for some reason, I always see posts that it's like, I went to my doctor and my doctor told me to stop doing XYZ or start doing XYZ. What do you guys think? And it's like, why would you even go to the doctor if you're then going to just turn around and ask unqualified strangers on the internet? You know what I mean? It's like, how can a company be like, well, ServiceNow's out of the box process is this, but, is it really the best way to do it? And it's like, yes.
Exactly. It really is. Yes, start with the basics, get it up and running, start using it, and then figure out what your needs are. But your needs need to be driven by business value. It's not a requirement just because I want it. It's a requirement because it drives business value. So maybe you got a compliance requirement that your auditors want you to do. That's a requirement. But just having to do something just because that's the way you've always done it, that's not best practice. And similar, another mistake I see commonly made is trying to make it work like another tool. And it's like, okay, you're getting rid of that old tool that nobody likes in your organization that you've all used for 20 years, and it's everybody universally hates it. Why make the new state-of-the-art tool look, work, and function like that just because you're used to it? Well, you're used to something bad. Go learn how to do it correctly. And there needs to be a little bit more openness within organizations to take on these best practices. And I've always heard of phrases, think like a startup. Come out and think, not why we're here today after all these years in business, but if I were to start a business today, how would I build my process? And I'd like to bring that into the consulting process because, especially with established organizations, because there's a lot of legacy things they do and nobody knows why. They just do it because it's always been done that way. And you can drive a lot of organizational change and improve a lot of the quality of the services you're providing if you just have a little bit of an open mind in how you approach things.
I absolutely agree with you. I think we're probably on the same page about most things. And I remember, even from when I was a business analyst to starting out in consulting, one of the main things that you're taught when you're gathering requirements, whether it's internal to your organization or, working in this type of relationship, is why, right? So we always ask why if they give a requirement. I feel like a better way to ask that question is, how does this drive business value? Because if you just ask them why, like, why do you need this? They're going to say, because I need it, because it's how we've always done it, because how the system works today, blah, blah, blah. But if you ask them, how does this drive business value? Then, maybe they have a good answer off the cuff. That's fine. Good for them. But if they don't, then it makes them stop and think, how does this drive business value? Is this reducing time? Is it blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and that tech debt gets in your way. It gives you issues when you're trying to upgrade.
Wait, Mike. For viewers listeners, viewers, for those who don't know what tech debt is, could you give them quick, what's tech debt?
I'm probably not the best person, but it's basically you've over customized something. You've got all this custom made technology that you now have to invest time and hours to maintain and support because it's no longer the out of the box experience. So you've created something, now it's on your back to maintain and support it. And you've got to keep carrying that around with you, and it never goes away. You just keep carrying it forward. So it's a burden that you made hopefully a conscious choice to carry. And it's unfortunate because once organizations get buried in this, it's hard to get out from under it without a complete ground up restart. So that's where the advantage of being out of the box is you can do those upgrades quicker, easier. You can take advantage of new features and capabilities because everything's where it's supposed to be. You're using all the fields the way they're supposed to, and everything just works. And so it's a lot easier if you start expanding. If maybe you started with ITSM, but you're expanding to HR or WSD or to whatever new module, there's a lot shared within this platform now. So the more you're using it the way it was meant to be used, the more likely you're going to be successful as you grow on the platform. And the other part of that is it makes it easier to automate as well and build those workflows so that there's automation, so things just happen instead of having to stop at somebody's desk to take a physical action to make something happen. And so there's definitely advantages to keeping things clean, simple, and out of the box so that you can implement it. But I think you sit down, you talk, everybody gets it, everybody agrees to it. But when it comes down to implementing, it's the, well, but there's this case. Well, there's this case, and you get all the well buts, and all of a sudden you're off in customization land.
Customization land. One area I don't want to travel to, not on the travel bucket list. Yeah. All right, Mike. Well, fun to talk to you. Thank you for joining me at Flow at Work, and I will talk to you all next time.